Welcome to the Opportunity Podcast, where entrepreneurs come to learn from real buyers, sellers, and industry experts on the lesser-known growth opportunities to build their online business empires. We'll uncover tactics veteran online business entrepreneurs have used to build, buy, flip, and sell their way towards personal wealth. Sit back, grab a coffee, and get ready to uncover hidden growth secrets. The Opportunity Podcast starts now.
Welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast, your go-to resource for hidden growth opportunities throughout online business. For those familiar new to the podcast, I'm Sarah, and thanks for joining me today. In this episode, I'm joined by Nathan Hirsch, the founder and CEO of EcomBalance, a monthly bookkeeping and analysis service that helps e-com sellers master their financials. Nathan gives us a crash course on the financial metrics that e-com sellers should keep a close eye on and explains the biggest bookkeeping mistakes e-com sellers often make. We also look back at Nathan's previous business, FreeUp, a company that connects businesses with talented remote workers. Nathan explains how he scaled the business from $1 million to $12 million in yearly sales and eventually sold the business for 8 figures. I don't want to give away too much just yet, so let's dig into the interview and see what Nathan has to share. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast. I'm really excited to be joined by today's guests. We've got Nathan Hirsch on with us today from EcomBalance. So Nathan, how you doing?
Sarah, I am doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's so good to have you with us today. So I guess we didn't get the chance to talk about it. I'm wondering where you're calling in from in the world right now.
I'm actually in Denver, Colorado. I grew up in Massachusetts, lived in Florida for 6-7 years, built a business and sold it there, met my wife there. And then when the pandemic hit, we bolted for Colorado.
Oh, smart move, huh? And now you've just been there for a couple of years, enjoying the outdoors and kind of getting the best of, I guess, the remote working world.
Exactly. My whole family moved here too. They made it very clear they were not going to move to Florida. But as soon as I moved to Colorado, they were all in.
That's awesome. It's like, guys, I can sell you. Wait a minute. I've got a new place to come. That's cool. I'm doing the whole digital nomad thing, and I'm surprised like how long it's taking me to get family to come and visit. I'm like, I feel like I keep coming to cool places, guys. And I think only this year, especially now I've been hanging around Europe, I'm starting to get the trickle of visitors in. So whatever you're doing, I need to just go your route to like convince people to come see me.
I love the digital nomad thing. I wish that in my 20s I had done that. Just go to Europe and work there for a year or whatever.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm in Portugal right now. I'm digging it. Probably will continue to hang around the continent for at least the near future. So I haven't made my way back to the States in a while, but we'll probably end up there eventually. But in any case, if I do, I'll probably end up like Denver, just like you're doing, because I think that's the place to be in the States.
Yeah, it's tough to beat for sure.
So you'd mentioned the business that you sold before. I love to start things off and ask people about their entrepreneurial journey. And I feel like sometimes that's the toughest question because it's like, basically, tell me your life story, but I'll kick it off to you anyway. So talk me through your entrepreneurial journey and how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, so I realized at a very young age that I hated working for other people. My parents were both teachers growing up, and I grew up with a mentality that I was going to go to school, go to college, get a real job, work for 30 years, retire. And that was their life. That was supposed to be my life. And they always taught me a good work ethic growing up. I had jobs from the time I was 15, and every summer, every winter, after school, internship in college, you name it. And I just learned that I hated clock in and clocking out. And I kind of looked at college as a ticking time bomb. I had 4 years to figure out how to start my own business, or I was going to have to go into the real world. My parents wouldn't let me move back home. I was going to have to get an apartment, pay bills, and have to have a job to support that. So when I got to college, I started hustling. I was buying and selling people's textbooks at the end of the semester. And one of the places I was selling these books was Amazon.com. This was back in 2008, 2009, before all the courses and coaches and gurus and all the stuff that kind of popped up afterwards. So Amazon was pretty new. Textbooks had their limitations. They were pretty heavy to carry around, and I could only do it at select times of the year. So I started experimenting with different ways to make money on Amazon that was not books. And through just a ton of trial and error with things I was familiar with, like video games, computers, sporting equipment, I finally came across baby toys, if you can believe that. For whatever reason, baby toys were easy to ship, had a good margin. I started drop shipping before I even knew it was called drop shipping. And before I knew it, I was running a pretty large Amazon business out of my college dorm room, doing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, eventually millions. And one of my first hires was my business partner, Connor, which is how I initially met him. And we've been working together for 10 plus years. Now, the issue with running a big business in college, being 20, is hiring. I had to hire people to grow this business. And college kids were super unreliable. They would smoke weed on the job, drink on the job. They wouldn't show up for work. It was a mess. And a buddy of mine introduced me to virtual assistants, and that really changed my life. So finally figured out how to hire. Took me a while to learn how to hire virtual assistants. And then I started offering these virtual assistants to other Amazon sellers, which eventually turned into my next company, FreeUp, a marketplace for e-commerce sellers. And kind of skipping ahead a little bit, and we can kind of dig deeper into it, but we scaled this business over 4 years, quickly surpassing our Amazon sales, got it to the point where we were doing 8 figures, and we were acquired by one of our clients right before the pandemic at the end of or in November 2019, which is pretty cool. So since then, we've been kind of figuring out what we want to do next. And that's led us to EcomBalance, helping entrepreneurs understand their numbers, make good decisions, pass due diligence with immaculate books like we were able to do. And that's kind of a super short version of how I went from books to baby products on Amazon to a marketplace FreeUp to now EcomBalance.
Wow, what a wild journey. Do you feel like you have this badge of honor being like OG Amazon? I mean, we're talking Amazon early days when, it was like Amazon for books, and it seems like you got started at that stage. Surely you kind of have to look at Amazon sellers today and be like, yeah, guys, I've been in the game since day one.
Yeah, it's funny. You always look back on like what could have been. Like I could have been that e-commerce guru, or I could have run that next like Amazon course or built that Amazon software. Like we were around before doing any of that, and it all worked out with FreeUp. But there were so many opportunities there that other people took advantage of, and we kind of went our own direction in virtual assistants. And it was just a wild time to be an Amazon seller.
Yeah, it's just so funny that you were in this situation of like, you had to learn how to hire people before you'd gone out into the real world and kind of experienced what it's like to be kind of properly hired in that real job that you were trying to avoid yourself. It's kind of an interesting space to be in. I know you'd been working since you were 15, but then all of a sudden it's like you're at what, 20? And then you're like, I am the hirer. I have to figure out how to do this. Okay, all my friends are unreliable. What do I do now? It's super impressive how you went from that to scaling and creating this operation that ended up like really taking off with FreeUp. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that because I know you eventually exited that business, and obviously a lot of stories within that. But let's start from square one. What were like the strategies and the techniques that took you from college student having to figure out how to hire other people to, okay, I've created a successful agency that went from 1 million to 12 million in yearly sales?
Yeah. So hiring, it just started off. A buddy of mine said, hey, I have a virtual assistant. They're in the Philippines. I'm not 100% sure I knew where the Philippines was on a map or had ever talked to someone in the Philippines. And we interviewed them quickly on Skype, hired them, and learned everything about how to communicate with people in the Philippines, how to motivate them, how to set expectations. And as we're growing this business, it was a lot of trial and error. Every time someone would go through our interview process and be really good, we would look back and say, hey, how do we ask better questions? How do we find more people like that? And whenever a disaster happened, like someone stealing hours from us or not showing up on day one or being late all the time, we would go back to our interview process and say, hey, how do we stop that same type of person from making it anywhere close to the end of our interview process? And Connor and I run a company now on the side called Outsource School, where we teach people our hiring process. But that process took us 5 years of every bad hire you can imagine. Like we had a pair of twins that we hired that we said, hey, these two sisters, they'd be great, but they ended up billing us twice as much hours. And it was only one of them working, pretending to be both of them. So we made every mistake imaginable. But once we figured out the hiring process, then it was a game changer because we needed someone for customer service. We needed someone for listing, for bookkeeping, whatever it is. We could just plug someone through that system, know we were going to get a rock star, and then be able to take our business to the next level.
Yeah, well, I guess talk to me a little bit about some of those lessons, because it's like, okay, we just laid out some crazy challenges, some crazy situations that you had to learn over the years. How did you circumnavigate that and kind of go, okay, now I have a framework to avoid all of these things?
Yeah. So a big mistake we made early on, and a mistake a lot of people make, is just hiring based on experience or skill. Someone has
Interesting.
5 years of experience, they have 5 stars on Upwork or whatever it is. And we realized that skill is just one part of the equation. And we came up with what we call our CARE interview process, which is communication, attitude, red flags, and experience. So communication's huge. I mean, I only speak English, so I need someone who can speak English at a high level, but also someone that can just get on the same page quickly, where you're not just going in circles in conversations, you don't have to repeat yourself, and they actually pick stuff up that you say. Attitude is incredibly important. That's like the number one thing for us. We want someone who doesn't value money as like the highest possible thing in their life, because that's just not one of our values. We want someone who likes building, who likes being a part of a team, who's self-motivated, who, when something goes poorly, doesn't become an angry, grumpy person off to the side. So that's huge as well. And then red flag is kind of the key to the whole thing, because a lot of people, and us included early on, you're looking for all the reasons why someone is a great fit because you want to hire them. But really, you want to be looking for all the reasons why someone might be a bad fit. What are all the red flags that could pop up? For example, if you're hiring someone for the night shift, have they ever worked night shift in the past? Do they have any activities during the day that are going to interfere with that? Does this person not communicate or not respond fast enough on Slack when you're doing the interviews? Because that might mean that down the line, when you're trying to have a meeting, they take forever to respond there. So kind of putting it all together where only if this person has strong communication, if they have a great attitude, if there's no red flags, and they have the experience, that's when you actually decide to hire them.
I think the red flag thing is a really, really good point, because to your earlier mention of, hey, you can't just hire for skills. I think it's so easy to get excited about somebody, even, let's say before the interview, and it's like, oh, they have those skills that I really want. I'm really excited. They're my person. And then you get your hopes up, and all of a sudden, I think it's so easy for most people to really ignore the red flags and be like, you know what, that's not a big deal. I can get past that. It'll still work out. And then boom, you end up hiring that person. And then everything you ignored in that interview, all those red flags come back to haunt you and leave you wishing that you hadn't ignored yourself in the first place. So I love that you guys do that for people, because I'm, just speaking from experience of hiring and things like that, it's so easy to get really, get your hopes up. And what is that writing phrase? Like, kill your own darlings. Like, you really have to put your own stuff aside and be like, okay, be really methodical and like look at the entirety of the picture, not just what you want to see, everything you don't want to see as well.
Absolutely. And one thing that we teach in Outsource School is just because a red flag pops up doesn't mean, oh my God, I can't hire this person instantly. Let's end the interview. But it does mean you need to dig deeper and find out, hey, what's the backup plan? Let's make sure I really understand the situation. For example, maybe they have another side client, but maybe they're only working 2 hours a week for that side client. Maybe you could offer them a bonus for them to drop that side client. Like, there's other ways to dig deeper and find creative solutions, but you don't want to have a bunch of red flags that you don't have the full picture or that are not resolved and then move on to hiring them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. I mean, I'm wondering, I don't know if you're talking about with business owners in Outsource School, but are you sort of helping people kind of make a roadmap for saying, okay, beyond just hiring correctly for your business, that becomes an asset to help your business become more scalable and more sellable? Like, is that something you're almost coaching business owners on a way to think more about like the present moment and then really what their business could be down the road?
Yeah, definitely. And off of that, I mean, the way a lot of people set up their business is it's you, the owner, and then it's all your other VAs or employees or whoever it is reporting to you, when really that's an insane way to run your business. It's not scalable. It's very hard to sell that type of business as well. Eventually, you need yourself at the top, but you need team leaders. Like when we got free up to where we were doing 5 million, eventually 12 million, it was me and Connor at the top, but then we had a team leader for customer service. We had a team leader for bookkeeping. We had a team leader for marketing. We had a team leader for order fulfillment, in our case, matching up virtual assistants with clients. So each team had its own team leader. Some teams even had assistant team leaders, and then they would all work together. We'd have team leader meetings. So if we have a 40-person team, we don't just have 40 people reporting to me at any given time. That gets a little bit crazy.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like as a business grows, you're basically creating a hierarchical structure in order to support that growth. Without it, it sounds like you can't have one or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the key. And we like promoting from within too. Sometimes hiring leaders, well, not impossible. There's just a lot of things that can go wrong. Putting someone in is hiring Bob and then telling the whole team, hey, you now report to Bob. You better hope Bob really has his stuff together. And sometimes you won't even know that for an extended period of time. There's other just drama and stuff that can come up. So our default and the thing that we want to do is promote from within. Obviously, that's not always possible, but kind of having that known to people that, hey, leadership opportunities are open to you. If you can prove yourself, that can go a long way.
That's interesting. I think that's a really good point. I mean, I'm sure you face this all the time where you're probably getting a lot of entrepreneurs who are just like, they're stuck. They want to solve X problem. I have this problem in my business and I want this person to do this thing. And I think it's really easy to get bogged down and stuck in the moment of the initial problems you have to solve without thinking about where am I trying to scale my business? What are the future steps? What would a team look like? What would the team look like if they're all reporting to Bob? I think there's kind of like probably a chicken and egg situation when you're an entrepreneur working alone and you're just like, I just need some people versus getting to that, okay, what happens when I have some people and I want to be the type of business that's able to exit and pass these, employees on to a buyer, for example. I don't know, maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm projecting, but it sounds like you might have to do a little bit of coaching, if you will, to like actually move people through that mindset.
Yeah, I mean, it's two parts. One, you have to find people that want to be a leader because not everyone does. You can have really good employees, really good virtual assistants that have no desire to manage other people or move up or have more responsibility. And then second, they have to prove to you that they can actually do it. And it is a skill that you can teach. And we've had people that had no leadership experience that became great leaders because they wanted to and they learned quickly. Obviously, if they had that leadership or management experience in the past, that's a plus too. But you kind of need both those things to work out where the person proves themselves to you, but also really wants it. I've seen too many entrepreneurs try to force people into those management or leadership roles.
Oh, that's a super great point. I think it's a nice like gut check for entrepreneurs going, okay, what am I really doing with my employees here? And again, am I getting in my own way if I'm not really seeing like what is the true capability or potential of certain people on my team? Speaking of scaling, I'd be really curious to hear more about just some of the challenges that you had faced scaling Free Up.
Yeah. So whenever you have a marketplace, like you kind of said before, it's a chicken or the egg situation. It's like, hey, how do I get clients and freelancers and kind of have them balance at the same time? And that's every business, even EcomBalance, which is a bookkeeping service and not a marketplace. It's, hey, we need to make sure we have enough bookkeepers and enough clients. And we don't want to have too many bookkeepers without client work or vice versa. For us, we kind of got a little bit of a head start with Free Up because we had all of these virtual assistants and freelancers with our Amazon business. Our Amazon business was seasonal, so it allowed us to have a lot of people part-time or have extra hours that we could offer to Amazon sellers. So we kind of had a starting point of VAs and freelancers in our network that we asked their permission if we could add them onto Free Up. And then once we had the clients to fill up all those VAs and freelancers and the company had revenue, then we were able to take that revenue and build a recruiting service to constantly get more VAs and freelancers. And eventually we were getting about 1,000 applicants a week to get on our platform, which was pretty crazy. So making sure you kind of have that balance of clients and freelancers was incredibly important. Billing, which is a big part of why I'm so passionate about EcomBalance. And we help a lot of different agencies and service providers with their billing, getting that set up. So it's an automatic process of clients add their card, we bill them, the freelancers get paid. Reputation is incredibly important. You don't want freelancers wondering where their payments are or clients getting billed the wrong amount or having to chase people down for money. So kind of figuring out that system was pretty huge. And just the internal software. At the beginning, we were matching people up on Excel and via email, but eventually we built our own software. We built a ticketing system that matched people up. Eventually that did billing and affiliate links. So you kind of have that marketplace where it's finding clients, finding freelancers, and then the actual platform and systems and software that holds it all together.
Okay. Gosh, when you're talking about getting like 1,000 applicants a week, I'm like, how in the world did you, how did you get through that? Goodness. So I can see where like software, like you said, would come into play and just all those systems. Now, granted, so you went from having to navigate all that to having a pretty good engine running, and you had something that was quite sellable. So I'm curious about your exiting journey. Obviously, kind of fits what we're doing here at Empire Flippers. People are always curious about that part. How'd you identify the right time to sell your company?
Yeah. So to be honest, we never went into FreeUp being like, hey, we're going to grow this thing and sell it. Even early in 2019, selling it wasn't really on our mind. One of our clients reached out to us, Mark Hargrove from the Hoth, and he essentially said, hey, we use FreeUp. We love FreeUp. We own a bunch of companies. We want to get into the freelance virtual assistant space. We don't want to build it ourselves. Would you guys be interested in being acquired? And like anything else, we're open to listening to anything. And we kind of heard them out and they asked a lot of questions about the company and understanding what's going on. And they ended up making us an offer. And in terms of deciding whether it was the right time, it was a lot of factors. I mean, first of all, we wanted to make sure that whoever we sold it to had the same values as we did. We didn't want to create something for 4 years and sell it to someone who was going to drive it into the ground or hurt our reputation or hurt our clients or hurt the freelancers or our internal team. So we did a lot of research on them. And I mean, they'd won Employer of the Year 5 years in a row in Tampa or something like that. They had a great reputation, a lot of the same values. We got to know them personally. At the time, the economy was at an all-time high, and we were kind of looking at it like, hey, maybe it keeps going, but there's also a chance that this is a great time to sell it as well. We had also grown this business to the biggest business we had ever run. So I was doing $12 million a year, and we knew that structural changes would have to come into place if we wanted to get to $25 or $50 million a year. And maybe we could have figured it out. Maybe there would have been a large learning curve. We weren't sure. And they have experience growing companies to $30+ million a year. So a lot of those factors there. I think there's also, once you do something for 4 years, sometimes doing something else is exciting as well. There wasn't any factor that I would say is like, this is the reason we did it, but it was all these different thoughts that I kind of mentioned coming together to say, hey, maybe we should explore this more. And obviously it takes two to tango as well. And that was just the start of the due diligence process.
Talk to me about that due diligence among anything else. Like, what were the kind of lessons learned along the way that if you were sort of guide somebody else in your similar position, what would you say? Okay, these are the things you absolutely got to know if you're going to be selling to somebody.
Yeah. So the due diligence it took over 6 months, and it was probably the most stressful 6 months of my life.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It was a lot. And I mean, there were a few things that I think we did very well. The first thing was not only having them do diligence on us, but we were doing due diligence on them at the same time. And not just their business, but also them personally. Two people, Mark Hargrove and David Martin, we got to know them personally. We did a lot of digging on them. Every time they would send us over 20 questions, we would send them back 20 questions. We wanted to know every single thing about who we were selling to and make sure we were making the right decision. The other tip, and I was actually telling a buddy of mine this the other day, is the entire 6 months, we woke up every day saying the deal is going to fall through and we're going to end up with this business. So we need to stay focused on growing FreeUp. And this was tough, especially when you're dealing with lawyers and going through due diligence and you feel like you're so close to selling it, but then something else comes up. So Connor, my partner, and I, we would remind each other every day to stay focused on FreeUp. And it actually worked. The last month, October of 2019, before we sold FreeUp, was the best month that we had ever had in FreeUp. So we had stayed focused on growing it, even though we were going through due diligence. The other thing that really helped us, which kind of goes into why we started EcomBalance, is we had immaculate books going back to day one. Every time they would ask us for anything from client data to our P&L to specific breakdowns of clients and freelancers in months, they were impressed by how quickly we could get it to them. They would email us at 10 o'clock in the morning asking us for 10 different things. And by 10:30, it was back in their inbox because we had this stuff ready to go. We didn't have to go hire a bookkeeping firm or put together reports. We already had this stuff to go. So I think that really helped us get through it. The annoying part, and this wasn't their fault or our fault, is there's lawyers involved. Their lawyers are protecting them. Our lawyers are protecting us. The lawyers have other clients. While to us, it's the biggest moment of their life. To them, it's just another Tuesday. So trying to get them to move at a fast pace to, protect us, but also have some leeway to get this thing done. That's what took the longest over the 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, you said two pieces of fantastic advice. One, I just want to sort of circle back to what you said about basically not taking your foot off the gas for the business. That's huge. It's advice that we try to give sellers all the time. I think it's so easy when you're caught up in like, sweet, I'm selling, therefore I can coast. And it's like, no, you don't want to do that. Now, in our world, it's like, you're still having to run the business. That's going to affect your evaluation. Your evaluation can change when you're on the marketplace based on the performance of the business. So the last thing you want to do is get distracted and have that, affect your valuation, have that affect what the buyer perceives of your business. So the fact that you guys stayed focused, you didn't get, lost in, I'm about to be able to walk away from this and make a lot of money. Instead, you were really realistic and went, hey, this could change at any point. Let's just keep focusing on the business as if we'll run it forever. Fantastic. And obviously that worked out for you guys. Second thing there is, I guess, maybe giving you kudos. I feel like you're unicorns. The fact that you had all your books in order, that you were able to respond quickly to a lot of those numbers questions, that seems to be the biggest pain point. It's usually the one thing that sellers will share with us when they come and talk about what it was like to sell their business is, oh my gosh, if I could give anybody advice, it's books, get your books in order. I know it's painful. Don't be like me, or, maybe in your case, be like me. It's just great. I wanted to talk to you about your ability to do that, because that really is, I would say, I guess in the conversations I've had with people, it's kind of like the head in the sand moment for a lot of sellers. It's like, oh God, don't make me backtrack. Don't make me face the books. Whereas for you guys, it became a point of like your strength. It was just huge in the deal. So talk to me about how you were able to do that, how you were basically never the head in the sand and you just were on top of it. And how did you make that an easy process?
Yeah, so we learned a lot from our Amazon business. We did what a lot of entrepreneurs do, which is you don't do any books throughout the year. You take all your stuff at the end of the year, you dump it on your accountant puts it all together and then files your taxes, and then you kind of repeat the next year. But the issue is you don't really know what's going on in your business every month. So you can't make good decisions based on revenue and expenses and what you're seeing. But also your accountants, your tax people, they're doing your books to do your taxes. They're not doing it in a way for you to understand or necessarily for someone buying your business to understand with clear breakdowns and numbers that you need to see. So we learned that lesson from the Amazon business. We also learned that doing the books yourself is a terrible mistake. It's not a good use of your time. And most of the time, it just has to be redone later anyway, because if you're like me when I was 20, I wasn't very good at doing bookkeeping, and most entrepreneurs are not good at doing bookkeeping. So when we started FreeUp, even before we were profitable, we said, hey, we need books done the right way from day one, especially because we're going to be billing clients and paying freelancers. So we spent a lot of time recruiting a good bookkeeping service and getting that in place so that it was just there every single month. And we would give feedback to our bookkeeper. We would make tweaks along the way. So then when we got to that due diligence, we had 4 years of books from day one. And to me, if I'm an entrepreneur out there, if your books are not caught up, if you don't have a system where the month ends and within 10, 15 days of the month being over, you're getting reports and you're not falling behind, you're never 3 months behind, you have to get that system set up. And the time to do it is now, not when you're going to sell your business.
Absolutely. Yep. That's exactly it. And I think it's the, can you call it an aha moment or maybe like a major regret moment? Is when sellers go and they're like, sweet, gonna sell, can't wait to exit. Oh, wait a minute. You mean I have to look at the numbers now? I have to put all this together? Like it just becomes a huge pain in the ass, really, to go back and make sure that they're all correct. So I guess one of the questions I had in mind is like, I know that there's probably like different services out there, but what was it that made you want to create your own solution? Was there a particular gap or kind of weakness of what was available that you're like, nah, this isn't good enough. I think, we need to pivot here and do this on our own.
Yeah, we interviewed 200 plus e-commerce sellers. You can actually find an article on the EcomBalance blog of the interviews that we did before we launched anything, before we hired anyone. And we just wanted to learn what service providers are people using? What do people like? What do people not like? We talked to a lot of brokers like yourself and just kind of learning like what people are seeing. What are the pain points? What are the good experiences? What are the bad experiences? And we did see a hole, especially in e-commerce, although we work with agencies and stuff as well, of just being able to get those books on time every single month, having a bookkeeper that really understands e-commerce, because a lot of bookkeepers and accountants don't understand the e-commerce world, but also setting up businesses to sell, being able to do it in accrual and not cash basis, stuff like that. So we kind of took everything that we learned from those initial interviews, saw that there's a hole in the market, also saw that it's just a huge market, right? Because everyone needs bookkeeping. And then from there, set out to build a team and build process and kind of start our beta launch. So yeah, it's we spent a good amount of time just doing research on what's going on right now in the bookkeeping e-commerce industry.
Yeah, no, I see that. Especially when you're talking about some of those metrics you want to be looking at for sale. I guess that brought me to a question here about really kind of laying out the most important metrics. Because I think, especially if you're a seller and you're an ecom seller and you're a little bit new to this, you might not quite know what to focus on. So walk me through that. What are the financial metrics that are most important to keep track of in the world of e-commerce?
Yeah. So, first of all, you should be getting that income statement, that cash flow, and that balance sheet. And it's so important, especially if you're someone that's carrying inventory, which a lot of e-commerce sellers are, to not just get the income statement, but also to make sure your income statement is accrual basis and making sure you have that balance sheet as well. A lot of people also don't break up the sales channel. So you might be selling on Amazon UK and Amazon US, or you might have different brands or different products, and you want to be able to see what is your actual profit on all these different products. You might have 5 products, but you're really only making money on one of them. So that's something that we like to really focus on. Another one is your net profit after Amazon fees. A lot of people, they'll just take what they're getting deposited in their bank account and they'll use that as their revenue. But really, you also want to be able to see a fee breakdown of what you're paying every single month so you can see how those get adjusted, especially in times when Amazon is increasing fees, but also when you're dealing with inventory and doing cost of goods, being able to keep track of, hey, are shipments getting more expensive or whatever it is. So having a really good way of doing cost of good averaging, especially relating it to the different marketplaces you're selling on, a lot of that becomes incredibly important.
Okay. No, that's actually a very, very good point. I like that note about the different marketplaces. Again, super easy to overlook. Speaking of things that people overlook, in your eyes, what are the biggest bookkeeping mistakes you see e-commerce sellers making?
I kind of mentioned one of them, just taking the net or deposit in your bank and making that your top line of your books. I don't know why so many sellers do it. Super common. Yeah, another one is not using some kind of tool to connect to Amazon or the other marketplaces. Like we use A2X. There's a few other ones out there. If you're just going on Amazon reports, very, very difficult to get accurate numbers. I'm surprised Amazon hasn't fixed that or come up with a solution for that, but you really do need that third-party tool. And another one is just kind of what I said before of not having something that's getting to you every single month where you're just dumping it on your account or you're having your tax preparer do it or you're doing it every quarter. You need to have a system in place where the month ends and then you get the reports within a certain amount of time. It should be like clockwork. It should be a meeting that you have every single month with your leadership or your business partner, whatever it is, that should be in your calendar. And that's the biggest key no matter what business you're running.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a really nice framework for people to be kind of going by. If you're afraid of your books, hey, just don't do these things. Make sure you do this, don't do that. You've kind of run the gamut. You've been through so many different iterations in your ecom journey. And I'm wondering about, where you've landed now with EcomBalance. What about kind of developing this company just like really resonates with you?
Yeah, it's funny. People tell me I like to focus on the things that people hate in business, which is hiring and books, but they really are the most important things. There's very few businesses that can survive without hiring really good people. And there's very few businesses that can survive without understanding their numbers and having a good bookkeeping system in place. And I think the unique perspective we bring is we're entrepreneurs first. We're not bookkeepers first. A lot of times bookkeepers don't speak the language of entrepreneurs. They don't know what entrepreneurs need to see. And that can lead to a lot of miscommunication. It can lead to entrepreneurs just saying, hey, I don't even want to deal with these books. I have someone doing it. I don't need to go through it. I really want people to understand their numbers. I want people to understand what's going on in their business. I want them to be able to make decisions based on those numbers. And I want to be able to translate anything bookkeepers say that might be complicated into a way that the entrepreneur can actually use that information. So I think to me, since I've seen how important the books were in getting through due diligence and selling a company, but also making those decisions every single month, I want to help entrepreneurs do the same thing. Just like I saw back in the day that, hey, hiring great people helped me scale my Amazon business and even free up. Having great books was a big piece of that as well. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs are just missing that.
Yeah, I really like what you said there. It's something I guess I'd really thought about before, that in a way, there's a little bit of a gap between bookkeepers and entrepreneurs. And like you said earlier, bookkeepers are doing their job to probably put your numbers together for taxes, but it's just a completely different mindset when it's like, but I need the numbers to understand what I'm doing in the business or to, fix X, Y, and Z. Like, got to bridge the gap between those two things. It's so critical. It's so important what you guys are doing.
I want to jump in with just one more mistake that people make and why you can't do really cash basis for most e-commerce businesses. If you buy $50,000 worth of inventory, let's say you're buying it in January, but that's going to last you through April. If you just have that show up in January, that's going to be a huge loss for January. And then your other months are going to show making way more money. And that doesn't really tell you how your business is doing. Very hard to make decisions based on those numbers. What we do a good job of is cost of goods averaging, where you'll average that over the period of time and compare it to sales as well, and actually understand how much you're making every single month, even if you just bought all the inventory up front, if that makes sense.
That's a fantastic one. Again, I think the point that you made earlier, like having to do things through an ecom lens to like really actually make the books make sense, what you're doing makes sense. It's so critical, especially by the time you're getting to hopefully what would be the exit phase. It's like really taking some of those numbers and true situations into account are going to make all the difference when it comes to, say, your valuation and the perception of the buyer, which you know full well. I guess overall in your entrepreneurial journey, would you say that there's some key lessons you've learned from the ups and downs over time and anything you'd want to share there?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is that there's so many ups and downs. I think at the beginning of being an entrepreneur, every time there's an up, you think you're on top of the world and no one can touch you. And whenever there's a down, you feel like your life is over and you need to go out and get a real job. And as you get older and you're doing this for a while, you realize that everything that goes wrong is just a problem that needs to be solved. And anything that goes well, being an entrepreneur is humbling. So something is bound to go wrong at some point, and you need to continue to push forward and look for other things that could go wrong and try to fix them. So being a little bit more even keeled, a little bit more positive across the board, that's huge. Building processes and systems, I mean, that's something that we're all about. Like even now with EcomBalance, the whole business is processes. If someone comes to us and their AR system is a mess, we want to revamp that and create a really good system before we actually start doing it. And also creating a way to get clients in the door from the point that they want to work with us to the point they're actually working with us. How do we make that as efficient as possible? So kind of looking at everything as a process. Sales is a process. Marketing is a process. Order fulfillment is a process. Hiring people is a process. When we're going to hire people, it's the same process every single time. So kind of having that mentality and being able to look at something and say, hey, is this process built yet? Are we building it? Are we still working on it? Where does that look? And can you put people in place that can actually help you build the process? Because you don't want to be the only person in your company that's a builder and be surrounded by followers. You want other people who can take ownership, who can take on a project and build it, hopefully even better than you can.
I like that. The idea of a builder creating builders ultimately in order to kind of scale that empire. That's what you're getting at. I think it's huge. I think it's like the difference of, you think you're a solopreneur building a business to really actually scaling something that sounds like it could be so much bigger than yourself, but you have to actually be able to replace yourself in the process. Very cool. Well, Nathan, it's been fun kind of having you on here talking about all these different businesses and being in the Amazon space since day one, overcoming flaky friends and actually developing a great business on top of that, which is kind of taking you where you are today. Pretty cool. I usually wrap these up with a couple rapid fire questions. And if you're cool with that, I can kick the first one off.
Let's do it.
Alrighty. So first one, what are the best hidden growth opportunities within Ecom?
The best hidden growth opportunities. Man, I mean, building your list is just second to none, especially if you're going to sell it. Being able to actually own the information of your customers outside of Amazon. I think a lot of people are not necessarily focused on it, although I think it's come into play more in the past few years. But that's something that we really enjoyed growing Free Up and Outsource School and now EcomBalance, which we didn't really like on our Amazon business, is being able to actually take control and own a brand and have people actually recognize that brand. And it all starts with being able to gather your customer information in some way.
That's a fantastic one. We're definitely a big fan of that tactic. What tools or resources can help people to optimize their business financials?
Yeah, so A2X is a good one. If you're an ecom seller and are not using A2X, definitely recommend it. There's some other ones like Connect Books and Cinder, but I definitely recommend A2X over them. We try to not reinvent the wheel. Like QuickBooks is still the go-to, or Xero. Those are the top two. I see a lot of people trying to get away with like Wave or another free tool like that. It's not worth it. Pay the fee, use the right software. You're going to be happy that you did it in the end. And as for like processes, we use ClickUp. We've been a big fan of that throughout the years.
I like that. Yeah, I think that's some pretty solid advice. Well, final question, sometimes the hardest one. What has been your funniest moment working with an ecom?
My funniest moment working on the ecom. This is funny in hindsight, but when I was an ecom seller, I went on vacation. It was my first vacation in years as I was trying to hire people. And on the first day of my vacation, I got 3 phone calls. My manager quit. My biggest supplier dropped me, and then my accountant called me and said someone had stolen my identity and filed like a fake tax return in my name and had stolen like $40,000 from the government.
Oh my goodness.
So it was just like the most disastrous first day of a vacation. And all 3 ended up being fine. Like I hired a better manager. The supplier dropping me ended up being a blessing in disguise because I learned a lot about diversification and working with different suppliers. And the IRS thing, like now I have a PIN number when I submit my taxes, and it was a little bit of paperwork, but it wasn't the end of the world. So in hindsight, it was funny, but it just kind of shows that the entrepreneur is like ups and downs. You think your life is going to be over when you have a bad day, and then it ends up being something good that actually helps you and you learn a lot of lessons in the future.
Was your vacation even salvageable, or did you just give up?
It was not salvageable. That vacation was ruined.
That's what I thought. I was like, that didn't sound like something that would have just gotten fixed. And then you could go back to the beach. Like, it's like, oh, I lost my vacation now. That's what it sounded like. Well, cool. Nathan, it's been a lot of fun getting to know you and your story a little bit better. For those out there who'd be interested in finding you and seeing what you're up to, where can they reach out?
Yeah, hit me up on social media, Nathan Hirsch on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Go to EcomBalance.com, mention this podcast, and we'll get you 2 free months of bookkeeping. And if you're interested in learning my hiring process, go to Outsource School.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for sharing, especially on 2 critical subjects. We talked about, hiring and bookkeeping being the things that people tend to avoid, but you came and gave people gold. So I think this is going to be really handy for our audience. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's been great.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. I hope you've walked away with a bit of new insight that'll help you in your digital entrepreneurship journey. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating review. To learn more about businesses available for sale at Empire Flippers, click the link in the description or visit empireflippers.com/marketplace. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.